Good afternoon, everyone. As Alex just said, my name is Noel Trout. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Avinode Group. And today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, which is technology. Who is Avinode Group? We are a software service provider in the business aviation space with a vision of a seamlessly connected business aviation industry. We're obviously a long way from that today, but we're working hard towards it. To that end, we have 3 products in the market today. We have Avinode, which is where we started. That is our B2B marketplace for buyers and sellers to connect around chartering an aircraft. We have Scudero, which is a modern fleet management system for operators to run their daily business on. And we have Paynode, which is a payment platform specifically designed for the challenges that we see in the business aviation industry. I'm not going to talk too much about us, but I'm happy to answer questions later. Instead, we're going to talk about technology. This is a bold statement, a semi-famous quote in the technology space. Software is eating the world. What does that mean? Well, everybody knows that in today's day and age, there's no longer a split between I'm a tech company or a non-tech company. Every company has to find its way towards applying technology to be successful, which for a lot of companies is a huge challenge. You know, I might have gotten my website up, I'm selling my widgets, but now all of a sudden I'm expected to do big data and personalization and all those kind of things. It's a lot to take on. But luckily, there's help coming. There's been an absolute explosion of companies popping up in the SaaS space, which means software as a service. That's where you're selling your software on usually a membership basis and plugging it in. And these companies are really changing the way that software is developed in the modern age and the way it's brought to market. So these are companies that are usually popping up quite quickly, and they're very, very focused on a particular niche problem. And importantly, their products are designed not to be standalone solutions, but to be part of an overall solution. So they're designed to be plugged into something else. So a good example of this, if you want to think about it, is really, it's more like the App Store for phones, but coming to the wider software market. And you can see this if you want to go, Salesforce is a great example. If you go to their app exchange, there are thousands of different products there that you can buy and plug into your Salesforce account. How does that all work? It seems like magic. The key is APIs. Business aviation and technology go great together because we both love acronyms. API stands for Application Programming Interface. And what it really means is that it's the mechanism which your software talks to the wider world. So a great layman's example is if you go into any house, there's always an electrical socket, right? I don't have to know anything about how that works behind the scenes, the wiring of the house, how it connects to the electricity grid, you know, what the power source is, if it's a wind turbine or a nuclear energy plant. I just have to know if I take a cable that looks the right way and I stick it in that socket, I'm going to get out energy with a certain voltage. It's the same thing with an API. If you think about the software product that you use as a black box, an API is that component that you put on the outside of the box that says to the outside world, here's how you can talk to me. Here's what you can get out of me. Here's who can talk to me. Here's what I can give you. And why are they important? So we've seen this for a long time in traditional manufacturing where the industry and the world has moved on from an area where it was craftsmanship. You built everything in your workshop. You packaged it up and you put it out and you sold it in your workshop. Until nowadays, it's more about assembly. You still build things, the key components, but more and more, you're sourcing your components from third parties, and it's become an exercise in assembly versus craftsmanship. And we're finally seeing the same thing happen in technology and software, which is important because with that possibility, options are always good in business, right? With that possibility comes the option for me to say, do I want to build this, or do I want to plug this in? It requires different skill sets than traditional software development, but it gives you opportunities to structure your business in a different way. So how are APIs driving disruption? We can take a look. So there's a lot of reading. You can do it. They are disrupting lots of different industries. They're going to come to us as well. How are they doing it? We're going to look at 3 factors. One is speed to market, like we just talked about. If I don't have to build everything, I can probably get there faster. So if I have skill sets in assembly and I'm competent in those areas, I'm probably going to be able to get my product to market faster. I've spent a lot of time building software over the years, and if you've ever tried to order software from your engineering department or a consulting firm, it usually goes like this. I have a problem, I'm very excited, I want to solve my problem. I go and talk to my engineering partner, and they start asking questions. Okay, should everyone have it? No, only these certain users. So I had a requirement for authentication and security. Okay, should the information be there if I restart the computer? Yeah, of course. I had a requirement for storage in a database. Is there going to be a lot of information? Yeah, you should be able to search and filter it. Okay, now I have to search and filter. So you start building up all these requirements and the things around the problem that you're actually trying to solve. And by the end of the day, you have a mountain to climb before you can actually get there to the problem you're solving. And you leave that meeting terribly depressed and sad and go back to your desk and cry a little bit. With the world of APIs, all those things I just mentioned, I can decide if I want to go out and let somebody else handle those. There are these niche companies that have popped up that will do each of those individual things very well. So if I want, if it's not mission critical to me, I can choose to outsource that and let somebody else handle that. And that's powerful because it can get me where I'm going faster. You can delay decisions all of a sudden. The second factor is kind of leveling the playing field. So traditional software development involves a lot of lifting, like I just described. So we can take an example. If you were in the business of content management systems, which is a fancy word for saying, what powers your website usually. You usually have some piece of software where your marketing team can go in and write content, tag it, etc., and then it gets published. Traditionally in content management systems, that's all one vendor. Those things happen in one piece of software, which is a lot of lifting. There's a lot of engineering that goes into that, especially on the display side, where companies are very particular about how their websites look. I don't want it to look like my competitor. I want it to do this. This color has to be this. So the engineering effort around the display side is enormous. Since you combine those to do traditionally as a vendor, it's a really big burden of entry for a new company to get into that space. But when you start to talk about APIs, and people get more technically competent in that area, you start to talk about customers who say, oh, well, okay, I could probably consume an API for certain parts of that instead. And as a vendor, the new generation of content management systems are saying, okay, I can't do display well for everyone. I'm not even going to try. I'm going to focus on content authoring, and I'm going to wrap it up in a really good API. And then it's up to the customer to do display, because they're better at that than I am, or I'm not going to take on that challenge. When you do that, you suddenly narrowed the problem to this one niche focus area, and all of a sudden, it's open for a lot more companies to participate. Small companies can play in the same space as traditionally large companies had to play in. And 3, silos are getting removed. So APIs are all about getting data flowing back and forth. So if you want to talk about data flowing back and forth, you can talk about widening the audience of who gets to see that data. And when you widen the audience, you involve more people in the conversation. And suddenly people who weren't able to access that information before can have a look at it, can have an opinion, and can come up with new ways to use it. And that's important because that usually leads to innovation and to disruption. Let's talk about APIs and business aviation. We are an industry that is historically the exact opposite of what I just described, right? We are characterized by being slow to adopt technology, which we still are, even if it's getting better. And we're an industry characterized by data silos and a reluctance to share data. But we're going to take a look at a few numbers from our platform, and we think that's changing. So these are some numbers from Avinode Group for 2018. We have 1,685 member companies, which business aviation, we're small, so it's a fair sampling. And roughly a third of those companies in 2018 were making API calls. So that means companies are investing in technology and digitalization, and they're trying to do things differently. But the more important number, I think, is the one on the right there. And I'll explain that in a second, but for me, this is really the number that's talking about connectivity and getting rid of copy-paste in our industry, which we've been, as again, data silos, plagued by for a long time. So webhook is basically, if you don't know what it is, it's essentially a server-to-server push notification. So it's one software calling another software to talk. So it's just like on your phone. You get a push notification of some event that happened, stock market alert, so that you can take some action. I want to buy stock or sell stock. It's the same thing with webhooks. They're essentially a way for our members or other software to come and register and say, hey, I'm interested in this event. It could be quote received, flight scheduled, some sort of event. And then we notify them in real time of that event happening in our platform, and they can take action based on it. In other industries, you'll see this mechanism used for things like, okay, an order was just placed, I'm gonna update the big data source and run the machine learning and all that. We're a ways away from that still, but this is a sign that people are investing in getting rid of the copy-paste problem and automating what have been traditionally very manual processes in our industry. Some numbers continued. These are also from our platform. Average searches per month is probably the most interesting one. 2018 was the first year that we saw average searches per month being more from APIs than from users logged into our website, which it's still early days, still a lot of experimentation going on, but this is a clear sign that people are investing and trying and experimenting. So it could be things like member companies trying to use the functionality of our platform, but without our UI, doing it in their system instead, embedding the functionality. Or it's things like our member companies trying to service their end customers better by providing them more information earlier in the chartering lifecycle. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some tips for me, I guess, to get involved in APIs. And there are really two sides to think about when you think about APIs. There's the consuming side. I, as a business, want to use somebody else's API. Or the providing side. I have a product in the marketplace that potentially would have an API. Above all else, for both issues, this isn't going to be a IT tech issue. This is a win or lose competitive advantage type of issue going forward. The companies that are applying technology really well are going to be doing better. And it's going to be very, very difficult to see companies being an island where you can do everything yourself. You have to get good at this. So if you are a leader in a company, get involved, educate yourself, educate your company, get prepared. On the consuming side, remember what we talked about, choice is good in a company. I want to be able to decide what I have to do and what I can outsource. So to give yourself that option, get really good at consuming APIs. And that is something that your entire organization should be involved in. It should be your product and engineering team. This is a skill set. Get good at systems integration. Make sure you hire the right people. Do training. Also, though, having APIs mean you're working with business partners. This is a contract, a commercial relationship with another company in some form. Get good at finding and vetting providers. That's your legal and your compliance team. Architect your business for the hiccups is a fun one. Whenever you do this and you start to widen the number of people that are involved in delivering your business success, invariably there will be hiccups. Things will go down. It's technology. A server will fail, there will be a bug introduced, something will go wrong. You can either wait and be very reactive for that to happen and decide how it impacts your customers, how do we recover, how do we talk to people, or you can be proactive and have that conversation early. And I'm saying have it early. Talk about what are the scenarios? How bad would this be if the lights went out on this API for us? What would it impact our customers? It will inform your decision-making around things like redundancy, vendor selection. Who can I use for this? Do I need 2 APIs? What's our communication plan for our customers? All those kinds of things. But you have to have the conversation early, because if you wait until it happens, you're going to be in a much worse place. Netflix is a great example. As a company, they realized this really early, and they actually built software to address this. So the Netflix built a product called, they call Chaos Monkey. And the only thing that software does is it goes through Netflix's services and kills one every once in a while. Turns it off. In production. Just to see that it won't affect customers. Just to see that their engineering team and their practices will account for that from the beginning. And then be ruthless in your evaluation of what you have to do versus what you can do, what a third party can do for you. There will be some decisions when you look at it and say, somebody else could do this, but If it's mission critical, maybe you decide, I can't rely on somebody else for this. Or it's proprietary, I can't outsource it. Whatever it is, you're going to decide one way or another. And there'll be cases where you outsource or not outsource. But think really hard about having to build that. Because if you build it, you're going to have to own it forever. You're going to have to pay the maintenance cost for that. And providing APIs, if you have some sort of product in the market that is a software product, increasingly, if you haven't got the request already, you will have demands from your customers to have an API. People are starting to expect this. They want to be able to get data that they put in your software out. They may decide, I want to be able to use your product, but your UI is terrible, so I want to embed it in my UI instead. Increasingly, they will ask for that. And realize it is part of your product, not a project. It is not something that you can tick the box on and say, I'm done. It is a continuous effort. We work, at this point, on our APIs every week. Every week, there's an engineer touching something there. Also, you're going to be engaging with a new audience as a company providing a product with an API. And that audience will be developers. It could be developers that your customer employs, their staff, or it could be a third-party consulting firm that your client has hired. But you want that developer to have a fantastic experience with your API. It's about things like supporting them. It's about things like documentation. What's your sandbox environment? How do they move to production? All those things are important because you want that developer to have a fantastic experience, because they are the same person who's going to have a voice in deciding for the next project what API should we use for this problem. It's going to be rare and rare that you're the only company providing an API they could use. More often, they're going to have choices, and you want them to be advocating for you, because they're on the other side of the consuming APIs, and they're having that same discussion in their organization. Should we build this ourselves? Should we use a third party? Which third party? And developers are still going to have a very big voice in that choice being made. So in ending, I think that's kind of my call to action here, I would say. Are you ready, business aviation? Because 2018 might have been an inflection point. We're seeing the usage grow. It's finally arriving in business aviation, and I think we need to get ready for it. I'm happy to take any questions.
You're not ready.
I'm sorry?
Did you say you wouldn't take questions?
Yes, no, absolutely, yeah, of course.
Any question? We've got someone's Slido. If there's any questions in the audience. I think you answered one. Someone has said, our API is relevant to all companies. I think you've answered that. Philosophical. Oh no, let's go. Aren't APIs bypassing you?
There's, sure, there's a potential. I mean, I think any company where you're in between two parties, like we are in our marketplace product, there's a potential. I think we have to be very conscious, just like there are the GDS systems, it's the same as you're seeing in commercial aviation. If you're not providing more of a service than just being the technology pipe, you will eventually fade away. You'll be disintermediated.
Okay. And let's go for it is very bright with the white. Let's go with the last question, which is philosophical, Noel. Do you think the silos will come down? This could almost be a Japanese poem. Do you think the silos will come down, or will we just have larger walled gardens?
Yeah, there's a big debate going on around that in tech, especially as the other part of what comes hand in hand a lot of time with APIs is kind of cloud computing and vendor lock-in and things like that. I think it remains to be seen. I see what's happening as progress regardless. I think that as people start to get more of a taste for what's possible and seeing the data moving, they're going to be demanding that those silos do come down.
Great. Thank you very much, and we can break for coffee outside.